Yukon bound, come to our little town. It's in the north, you go round and round. The land of the midnight sun is creeping in. Now come on down and sit right in. Well, if you sit right in, then you fit right in, and you can dance around as you go to town in the car cross Bennett Lake. You can even skinny dip if you stay up late. Whoa! You can eat dried meat or dried fish too. Do the bum guts bungaloo, ho ho. Eat some moose tongue. Or you can listen to an old album of In Canoe. Coming north, come to our little town. Southern Lake Salupa, you can get around and have a ball. Yeah. Don't stay too long or you'll end up living here like many of the stories you'll hear all the time that I come to visit and there I was. I'm still here and it's 40 years later and I got 5 kids and 3 grandkids and 1 great-grandson and some others that are walking around saying, I think I know you. You look like me. I'd just like to say, if you come up north and you wanna play, you can hike or bike on the trails in Montana mountains. You can have some fun in the midnight sun. You can fish around town on the walk-in bridge. You can have a coffee or a swim. In the winter time, you can cut a hole in Bennett Lake and jump right in. If you're Yukon bound, come to our little town. It's called Carcross, you can get around. You don't need a car, it's small enough to walk. But there's one thing that really gets in my crock. It's the only one-way street in all of the north. How does that make any sense? Come on back, come on back. You can walk, take the railroad track, have some fun on the land of the midnight sun. So if you're coming north anytime, come on down to our little town in the Yukon Territory. You might find an elder to tell you a story. You might find an elder to tell you a story. Or you might find an elder to tell you a story.
light that makes me slow my stride. Mama said I'll always be a hero in my eyes. I can be the strongest in myself, I don't despise. Feel like I'm a prophet in disguise, but most these people's songs are lies, so what's the diff of mine? If everyone sees different lenses, how could I be blind? I just need to understand these simple little lines, the rhythm of my mind, my recipe to feeling fine. Yeah, I really feel I'm wound up. Maybe I'm drunk, damn, maybe too wind up. I think that I should hunker down, feel like I have wine too much. But every time I speak my mind, they say my lines are sus. I give up, kidding, cause I will always be down. My moment is now, I feel that when they listen I'm proud. So look at me, dad, some of these kids are calling me rad. I feel like a lad, pass that face, I'm kicked to the can. Falling in a new brand, but also walking on my hands, trying to balance what I can and never taking Zans. Now I'm blinded like a horse racing to my plans, but I see that paper's coarse and it grinds my soul like sand. Good thing I got two souls in one left hand, cause I miss my life with that first blow, then the next band. Yell my name like who knows, and my skin goes clam. Kinda wanna be the only person, and if it's worth it, maybe I'll be perfect. To close the curtains, they're probably hurting, but no one's asking, cause they're doing what they're told. It's tragic if they unfold, it's passive if they are old, and magic if they are told. Again, mention what I did without my friends, and that is why I represent. I keep my hand out for anyone to lend, but when that time's up, don't you dare pretend. Never will I live a life that makes me slow my stride. Mama said I'll always be a hero in my eyes. I can be the strongest in myself, I don't despise. Feel like I'm a prophet in disguise, but most these people's songs are lies, so what's the diff of mine? If everyone has different lenses, how could I be blind? I just need to understand these simple little lines, the rhythm on my mind, my recipe to feeling fine. Yeah.
Vita Tigriski, Vita Vitaniti, Sagara, Tika Nuguli, Sagara, it's any Nuguli. Dickety. Way, hey, ho, hey, hey, way, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, 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 ha, 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 hey, ho, hey, 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 ha, ha, ha. It's anything to ski. Dickety. Way, hey, ho, hey, hey, way, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, 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 ha, 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 hey, ho, hey, 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 ha, ha, tickety. Hey, hey, ho, hey, hey, way, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, 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 ha, ha.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Carcass-Tagish First Nation Community Comprehensive Plan sessions. Will be tonight, Wednesday night, I believe, and Friday night, starting at 5:30 p.m. And we welcome all the participants to give input on the draft plan, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the virtual session. Kanishchish.
Welcome back to our third and final installment of our community consultation series that we've been rolling out our draft final comprehensive plan for the CTFN traditional territory, the Carcross-Tagish First Nation traditional territory. We had excellent presentations on Monday and Wednesday. I really want to thank Tony Pennickett for the governance discussion that we had on Monday. It was very, very lively, very insightful. And then we had a really great session Wednesday with Honorable Jeannie McLean talking about wellness and healing. And today is my favorite topic, development and resilience, and we'll have Carol Ann Hilton bringing us that later in the agenda. But I'm very excited today. This project has been truly awesome, and we've had an amazing steering committee. We've had an amazing team. I really want to give a shout out to my whole team at Gunta Business. We got Jesse Stephen in the boardroom. We have Ryan Hennessy also in the boardroom. Jesse Stevens, the project manager. Ryan Hennessy is the lead planner. We have Christine Callahoo on the line here. She's our mentor planner, and we're being supported by Stephanie Pennickett. And yeah, it's just been such a tremendous honor. My name's Blair Hogan. I probably didn't start there. Blair Hogan, Gunta Business. My Clinkin introduction is Gunta Hiuhatuisa Ishkataneachat Ashara Haninataha Shidusach. We're extremely proud to be an all Indigenous company, and we're working on one of the first self-governing comprehensive community plans in Canada. So this comprehensive community plan phenomenon is happening across Canada. It's typically focused at reserve-focused or reserve-only First Nation communities. And this one is very complex because not only is it a self-governing outside of the Indian Act First Nation, but it's traditional territory encompasses 4 communities. So we've gone through great lengths to be encompassing in all 4 of those communities. So that's Carcross, Tagish, Marsh Lake, and Mount Lorne. CTFN taking the lead, and the Management Corporation, CTMC, has been a participant as well. And I just really want to also give a shout out to Mark Rutledge and Megan Jensen on the beautiful logo that they created for this whole project, all the brand assets, Mammoth Agency for the website, and Upstream Services for the tech support that we're receiving tonight and throughout this project. Just to remind everybody that the Comprehensive Community Plan is available for download on the app. Please, you have a couple weeks, February 8th, I believe, is the date that will close our consultation period. It's a unique format. And sorry, I've done this a couple times now and I forget that I haven't gone through everything on this third iteration, but we're hosting this virtual consultation model where we're hosting 3 events. As I mentioned the 3 events, but we're giving a 2-week window for people to interact with all the content, review all the live presentations, and provide feedback. In that 2-week window, we'll have what we need to finalize the plan, and then we'll be presenting this to CTFN in March for a final a CCP plan for Carcross-Tagish First Nation. It's been a 2-year process. The first open house we had in April of 2019, we had 150 people show up. We have a model of, we just throw a party, and we know people want to have fun. When you want to consult with people, we recognize that there's a lot of values that you need to recognize for them to feel involved, to feel that their involvement is important, that their feedback is valuable, and they're being heard. And that's something that we truly specialize in. We've had 200 people at our last open house in Carcross. And, there is a real risk for us to use that model right now in COVID. So we really, we couldn't even pretend like we're going to host a smaller version of a function. We had to go all virtual. There's just too much interest in this, and we really wanted to make this open and available for as broad of a period to as wide of a group and audience as possible. We've had 600 survey responses. I'm not sure how many community consultation plans can boast that type of response. So I'm extremely happy to be here with you today on the final step of this consultation journey. And
Blair?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, can we just do a little switch in the agenda and have Carol Ann Hilton do her presentation first? Christine, would that be okay?
I think that would be great.
A little switcheroo and had Carol Ann speak first.
Sure.
Yeah,
so,
awesome. Okay,
so
cool.
Before
I'll leave you to it.
Okay, thank you. That's actually a really good recommendation. We thought that we would kind of keep the audience kind of in suspense, waiting for the keynote speaker, but we do recognize that there's a lot of interest with this keynote speaker, and we want to make sure that we bring that forward. I do want to also mention all the steering committee members. I talked about the team, I talked about a lot of the technical inputs, but really the heart and soul of all of this has been the steering committee. It's been CTFN led. We have James Smith, Susanna Beckett, Robin Lord, and Frank James, who've been instrumental in this plan, from the inception of it to the scoping to the whole traditional territory. That was a leadership decision. Very complex for us to manage, but we're very pleased. CTMC, Emily Joulette, Carcross, we have in representation Colleen James, Laurie Crawford. Tagish, we have Bonita Ritchie. Marsh Lake, we have Walter Latour. And Mount Lorne, we have Don Buquois. So very happy that these guys have put in so much time. We've not only hosted all these things that I've mentioned, but we've had monthly steering committee meetings. We've had 3 retreats. It's been such an intensive process, and without the hard work and the dedication of these community representatives, there is no plan. So I really want to pay tribute and kudos to them. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, but before I do, I want to play our short video to just really set the tone today. This video, it's not the full video. If you tuned in early, there's just so much to cover in 2 hours. We can't show you the full 16-minute video, but I did play it early at 5 o'clock. We're just going to play our 3-minute overview. It was the teaser midway, just to kind of show context. Just hold the minute. Thank you.
The comprehensive community planning process in Carcross started with the Learning Centre, a large room full of Southern Lakes residents talking about what they valued, what they thought we might have needed for infrastructure, what were some of the issues and concerns coming out. And it was a really well-attended event which set a foundation and a groundwork for the committee to start moving forward through a 2-year process.
We're hoping the comprehensive community plan will be a vehicle to bring the entire community together, First Nations and non-First Nations alike, to have a conversation about how they want the community to look, how they want to interact with each other, how they want to deal with some of the big pressing issues.
We're looking at how do you plan better? What's the best way to bring all these aspects together? Bringing the First Nation, the non-First Nation, bringing various stakeholder groups. How do we plan, and not in silos? How do we plan collectively? How do we plan better? And how do we actually implement those planning processes so that we're building positive community in the best way that you can?
Carcross-Tagish First Nation is the only one in this pilot project that is a self-governing First Nation, which is kind of exciting.
The idea is to be as equitable as possible. It's a horizontal plan, so there's no hierarchy created. Everybody is participating as equals. So we hold the meetings in a different community every month. Every community presents on their vision and their take on the issues, and they present their values.
If you add up all the numbers in Carcross, Tagish, Marsh Lake, and Mount Lorne, you get a population base that's among the largest in the Yukon, outside of the city of Whitehorse. So you could see that a regional planning exercise has a great deal of merit and gives the people living in those areas a direct say on how their communities are going to evolve.
It's a way of hearing about other concerns in the other communities. It's identified many issues that are common to all of us, and it gives us a greater voice.
The main thing for me is community consultation. I mean, everybody has to live here, and we have to live here happily, so everybody should be part of the planning process.
It's a huge step. It's a bold and ambitious move. I'm watching it, and I think it's working better than I would have thought.
Separately, we're small, and together we're mighty, and maybe everyone helping each other can make things happen.
Wonderful. That gives me goosebumps every time. I probably saw it 100 times. Thank you so much for hanging in there. I am very excited to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. I haven't had the chance to meet Carol-Ann Hilton yet, but I've very much heard of her and all of her success. She's the CEO and founder of Indigenomics Institute and the Global Center of Indigenomics. Carol-Ann is a dynamic national Indigenous business leader, author, speaker, and senior advisor with an international master's degree in business management from the University of Hertfordshire, England. She is of New Cha Nulth descent, the Husqueeth Nation on Vancouver Island. She has led the establishment of a line of thought called #Indigenomics, growing a single word to an entire movement, which focuses on the rebuilding and strengthening of Indigenous economics. She is the author of Indigenous Taking a Seat at the Economic Table and is an adjunct professor at the Royal Roads University of Business. Please put your hands together for Carol-Ann Hilton. Thank you. And I will be prepared to share your PowerPoint when you're ready. So your microphone is muted. There.
Better? Thank you. Thank you so much kindly for the invitation to come and spend the evening here with you. Uklasish Carol-Ann Hilton, Heshquaksupsish Uklas Wakatush Koatsa Omti. I acknowledge the roots and place that have shaped me across time. I am from the Heshquaet Nation, and I carry the name Wakatush, which translates to big sister, and it means that I come from a line of the oldest woman. So my mother was the oldest, and my grandmother was the oldest, and I acknowledge that very much shaping my perspective of today and the work that I do. I would like to acknowledge, and I love going to the Yukon. I've been to the Carcross-Tagish territory, such a beautiful place. I tired myself out entirely doing slow motion videos at the desert part. I was like running around. I literally tired myself out. So I love going to the area. I love the people. I raised my hands and to your leadership in bringing this project together. I raise my hands to the leadership that has influenced you to have the conversations of the time of right now, of what has brought you together in planning for your future. I know we can't gather in person, but I'd like to acknowledge your territory, your traditional language, your stories, your place names, your ceremonies, and your ways of being and knowing, because all of that continues to shape the conversations and the leadership of right now, of what now calls all of us into being. So with that introduction, again, thank you for the time to present and do a keynote address for you this evening. As pulling up the PowerPoint here, I wanted to talk about that concept of resiliency in designing an economy of meaning. And I bring together the concept of our own resiliency as Indigenous peoples and our leadership and perspective of who we are, the values, our ways of being, how much that will continue to shape the economies of our future. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. I wanted to introduce the concept of indigenomics. So some of you, this may be a new word. Some of you may have heard of it, and some of you may have a hard time saying it. I know my Cree friends, they have a very thick Cree accent, and it has a hard time getting off of their tongue. So I appreciate this is a new word, and what has been important to me in that is that the word itself has been experienced as neutral and a place to build from. What I've been able to do with this newfangled thing of called a hashtag on social media and a new world of digital connectivity is build a platform telling a story and building space around Indigenous business success. That is the underlying intention of Indigenomics, is to build the stories of our success as people. And that is really the foundation and the element of our resilience. So I define Indigenomics to be the collective economic response to the lasting legacy of the systemic exclusion of Indigenous peoples in the development of this country. So the concept of being able to build from that truth, a truth of a systemic Indigenous exclusion, the place of leadership of which you have been able to come to today, and to be able to build a future on Indigenous economic inclusion. That is essentially what Indigenomics is. I refer to this concept that Canada itself was built through the problem lens of the Indian problem. Our policies, our structures, regulations were all designed through that lens. So we look to the early words of Duncan Campbell Scott. He says, "I want to get rid of the Indian problem. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic. There is no Indian question and no Indian department." When we look at these concepts of the lens of the Indian problem and how that has shaped policy and its impacts across time, that is what Indigenomics is responding to. It's responding to our ability to build our collective response to now from an economic perspective. What is Indigenomics? It is a statement of claim of Indigenous space in modern existence. It is revaluing our Indigenous reality and worldview from an economic perspective. It's a call out or an invitation into an Indigenous worldview and that application into the concept of development and progress. It is a testament to our resilience. It's building constructive relationships that nurture economic success based on well-being and inclusion. So we're shaping an economy of meaning based on well-being. To shape that as a fundamental intention of economy, that is what Indigenomics is returning to revalue our Indigenous ways of being and knowing, to bring attention to our systems and functions of economy of old, and to bring the wisdom forward that is required in our future. To be able to move beyond the concept of the Indigenous socioeconomic gap, to be able to establish Indigenomics as a concept of constructive generative economic design. So designing our futures to shape meaning of who we are. Indigenomics is restoring the narrative away from Indigenous peoples are a fiscal burden towards we are an economic powerhouse. Realizing what you've been able to do through self-governance within the nation, it is important to be able to continuously build upon the strengths of your economic success, your partnerships, and pathways for inclusion to highlight the key features of being an economic powerhouse in your own territory. Why Indigenomics? So we heard earlier about this concept of the evolution of Canada being based and shaped on the Indian problem, because we're still confronting the Aboriginal question of today, of deconstructing the systems of economic exclusion, because we are in a legal and an economic relationship with a heavy emphasis on the legal and less emphasis on the economic. Looking to establish the balance of that relationship is where we can shape building economies of meaning within our own territories. Because closing the socioeconomic gap isn't working. If we continuously measure how Indigenous peoples are falling behind, of whether that's education levels, or different metrics of marginalization, or the lack of economic activity in our territories, what becomes important is to begin to start measuring Indigenous economic strength. In the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it describes a right to an economy. Indigenous peoples are the only ones in this country who have had to fight to have a right to an economy. So to define that right to an economy, instead of looking at that as an opportunity or a burden within the relationship, it is important to frame that as an opportunity of economic inclusion that is essential not only to the future of the region, but to this country overall. There was a recent article that came out of the Narwhal last week, and this is in a larger Yukon context of referring to the 0.3% value of resources in the Yukon going to in First Nations. So we are existing within an economic metric that doesn't make sense. We can't have it both ways. We can't tell a story of dependency and self-governance and facilitate pathways for economic generation. To be able to demonstrate our resilience needs to be able to demonstrate the success of our partnerships, the success of our pathways to inclusion, and the success of shaping meaning in what our economy is to become. The focus of Indigenomics is essentially to increase visibility of the Indigenous economy and businesses regionally, to be able to move out of a problem frame towards collaborative approaches to community economic development. So to look at that concept of collaborative approaches to community economic development, the principles of inclusion, the principles of constructive design, that is in its essence an outcome of the comprehensive community planning process. The focus of Indigenomics is to increase the visibility of Indigenous entrepreneurship, to be able to demonstrate its growth as well as the challenges. The focus of Indigenomics is modern, constructive, generative economic design. It is not measuring the socioeconomic gap. Instead, it's facilitating a narrative of our strength of who we are as people. The focus is essentially about facilitating our relationships and partnerships for Indigenous business success. It's time to move beyond the socioeconomic gap and be able to build the story of our economy of now. At a national level, we are experiencing a shift in social meaning. At a national lens, we look at the early rudimentary metrics of the measurement of the potential size of the Indigenous annual economy. The earliest being in 2010, which identified $10 billion, 12 and 16 over 2012 and 2014, and the last measurement being 2016 at $32 billion. A shift in social meaning of Indigenous constructive generative economic design is moving away from the Indian problem to Indigenous economic empowerment. When we look at the larger picture of a perception of this shift, what we see is an increasing amount of an estimate of 20% of Canada's land base being controlled directly by nations. This establishes itself as a new sphere of influence. When we look at the national perspective, we see well over 250 legal cases that have been won by nations and are creating a new economic space and meaning of the requirements of engaging with nations. Again, I emphasize the key point that the balance in the relationship, that we are in a legal and an economic relationship, and to be able to demonstrate the pathways for economic design, that is shaping the story of our resilience, of the emergence of our economy of today and of our future. This concept of economic space is something to be able to realize that the leadership required now to be able to drive economic generation, to be able to drive an increase in citizen-based entrepreneurs, and to be able to facilitate the capital requirements needed to grow our regional economy. The economic space requires leadership. It requires design. It requires focused attention, and it requires pointing to the pathways of success. Indigenomics is essentially about building our response to now. I enter a concept of happen to us versus designed by us. And while I recognize the function of being a self-governing nation, there's a history prior to self-government of very much experience of happen to us. To be able to utilize self-governance as a tool and to design from that and to create the space of designed by us, that is the leadership moment that we are all called into this moment for. Building our response to now is essentially, I love the title, Awakening the Greatness Within, of your comprehensive community plan. That concept of building our response is the same of awakening that greatness. And that theme is so powerful and so much that oftentimes in my work, I'm working with mainstream economists in Toronto or Ottawa. And I always start with, what a powerful time to be alive. Well, we realize from a generational perspective, the difficulties that have come with the translation of the mainstream economy and disruption of ways of life and being and knowing, to be able to design our business relationships in new ways. That is the opportunity. Indigenomics focuses on the concept of the power questions that we ask now create an Indigenous futurism. So to be able to understand and construct the questions that we were asking, next slide. What becomes important in that concept is that questions are the architecture of tomorrow. If we reflect back on what were the questions asked in the early days of self-governance, what was wanted or what was focused on, the results that have been created, it becomes important to understand what are the questions that are being asked today. To ask a question, how do we shape an economy of meaning built and designed from within an Indigenous worldview? That is the opportunity. I refer to a piece of research by Indigenous Works that I did a series of national surveys of large and small enterprises across Canada that identified this concept of the disengaged. The outcomes of the survey realized that 85% of Canadian businesses are in no way, shape, or form engaged with Indigenous communities. So as you build a regional perspective of a comprehensive community plan, the invitation to do business, the invitation to design your partnerships, this is the collaborative space that we're working in today. So the leadership space of realizing and bringing attention to this concept of the disengaged, that is the work or the heavy lifting, is to bring more focus into a narrative of Indigenous business success and design. Actually, next slide. Indigenomics is essentially about elevating a message that we are a powerful people. Our resilience has allowed a legal environment that has shifted the economic landscape of this country. The requirement for inclusion, the tools of self-governance, the tools, resources, and the ability to bring people and capital together is an expression of our resilience from an old world to a new world. Understanding and driving and planning from the construct of we are a powerful people. That is really what Indigenomics is driving. That there's a story of resilience. There's a story of our ability to build from this truth. Returning to that concept of the unengaged, this is essentially about now the opportunity to build inclusive workplaces and to increase employment through partnerships with communities. The concept of parity is an important introduction to the concept. There was a CCAB report that identified if Indigenous peoples in Canada were to achieve the same education and employment as non-Indigenous peoples, Canada's GDP would increase by 401 billion by 2026. If we look in particular at this immediate environment, I think I saw the latest metric that identified Canada being about $400 million in debt. So when we realize the potential and pathways for Indigenous inclusion and that to connect directly to the GDP, that is the opportunity, but the leadership needs to happen locally. Again, a National Indigenous Economic Development Board came to a similar conclusion around the activation of the Indigenous workforce, which identified that if the Indigenous workforce nationally was activated, it could add 27.7 to the annual GDP. So realizing that what are the constructive pathways for action, that is essentially what Indigenomics is facilitating. This is essentially the opportunity that we're looking at. To be able to construct from a place of power, to be able to shape economic meaning of who you are based in your territory and shaped by self-determination, that is the opportunity. Next slide. The Indigenomics Institute is operating in a field of possibility. In an earlier slide, I identified the size of the national Indigenous economy at the last metric of being 32 billion. So to grow the Indigenous economy to 100 billion, that from its current value, that is the field of possibility. But to understand how that is directly connected to our region's future, how that metric is directly connected to our national GDP, it becomes apparent that our economic success regionally and nationally is directly connected to Canada's economic success. I saw a metric today that identified that Canada's GDP in a COVID environment, of which was greatly celebrated, was an increase of growth of 0.07%. But when we realize the connection and the direct relationship between the Indigenous relationship, our business generation, and Canada and our regional GDP, that is where we can begin to design from. I introduce a concept called the Indigenomics economic mix. These are 12 levers of design or enabling of Indigenous economic growth and inclusion. Each of these levers demonstrate the ability to establish places of design and places of inclusion. The first is Indigenous equity. We're seeing at a national and a regional level an ever increasing story of inclusion of Indigenous equity ownership. When we look to examples of groups such as the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, who are demonstrating in real time the impact of supporting nations' capacity to participate at equity ownership level, this is changing the economic field of Canada's economy itself. The infrastructure as an economic enabler. When we look at this concept of the infrastructure gap, we also can look at a COVID environment of being able to demonstrate the national narrative that says infrastructure must play a key component in our economic response. The next is procurement. I understand that the Yukon is also looking at a regional procurement initiative, which is the absolute right pathway for Indigenous inclusion and the ability to facilitate that potential and growth of Indigenous businesses. The next lever is trade. So when we see the ability to facilitate Indigenous businesses ready for export, when we see national trade agreements or provincial trade trade agreements with the inclusion of Indigenous business within that, we can understand the role of trade in Indigenous economic design. The next is entrepreneurship. With a growing army of Indigenous entrepreneurs, I look to examples. There was recently over this Christmas, my colleague put together a Shop First Nations Indigenous Women's Market because our people were not able to get our regular arts and crafts to markets and conferences in the same way in this COVID environment. Within 2 months of existing as a Facebook page, there was over 45,000 people that joined, which demonstrates an increasing focus on shopping locally, a digital world, and a new world of connectivity, which opens up that potential around our ability to facilitate an increase in Indigenous entrepreneurship. The next lever is capital. So we hear this consistent story around the undercapitalization of the Indigenous economy. That is a place and point of leadership, of designing capital and designing access to capital in new ways that requires a focus of understanding the bottleneck of the growth of businesses and the availability of capital. We're successful in business in spite of that old story. When we realize that Indigenomics is essentially about convening the tools, the resources, and the people for designing economic and business generation, capital must be at the heart of that. The next is clean energy. When we look at groups like the Indigenous Clean Energy group that identified close to 3/4 of over 600 nations nationally, all are engaged within a clean energy project, we see the significance, and from a regional perspective, the importance of placing and designing programs to support increased inclusion of Indigenous peoples within clean energy projects. The next is social enterprise, and I've defined that separately from entrepreneurship itself, but realizing an ever increasing number of Indigenous businesses that are so directly connected to community and shaping meaning through business. Next slide. The final set of levers include the philanthropic environment and understanding the role of economic reconciliation and Indigenous leadership that supports conservation and regenerative economic design led by Indigenous people. The 10th lever is leadership in commerce. The example that I use to demonstrate commerce as a specific lever, when we see major corporations such as Shopify beginning to establish an Indigenous stream to support the connectivity of Indigenous entrepreneurs to an ever increasing digital world. The realization of the role of commerce in an economic design is very important. The final 2 levers is technology and then leadership in the investment environment. This is I'm currently undertaking a research project around understanding the size of the national Indigenous investment environment and connecting that to a $100 billion Indigenous economy. This is a number of which I've never been able to verify, but I was told that the Yukon self-governing nations have more money invested than the entire Yukon government. When you look at the potential of a number like that, the natural conclusion is we are a powerful people. So understanding these as levers, as enablers, and tools of economic design, that is the fundamental intention of Indigenomics. This is about locating our leadership. It's about locating our leadership in our planning and describing what our future looks like. I draw your attention to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. To be able to understand and bring a truth to economic inequality and the structures of that, to be able to build partnerships for inclusion and the increase of Indigenous businesses. This is about being able to plan beyond the problem lens of what has presented itself, of what we are told the challenges of economic development are. This is about understanding a regional economy in relationship to Indigenous economic growth. The concept of Indigenomics has always been about building a positive platform. It is about building the space for leadership, and it is about building the space for inclusion. Indigenomics has always been an invitation of who wants to play Indigenomics, about designing our leadership points, designing our business relationships, designing the space for Indigenous entrepreneurs, designing our tools, and designing the meaning of the future of our economy. Thank you so much for the ability to spend time with you. And I wanted to bring your attention to the last slide. And I'm sorry the picture didn't show up on this slide, but I have my book being released, which is Indigenomics, Taking a Seat at the Economic Table, which is available on March 16th or available for pre-order on Amazon. And essentially the concept of the book is centering Canada's reality in a development of Indigenous economic exclusion and centering Indigenomics as a design component of essential to our future as a country. Again, thank you so much for having me. I wish I could be in Carcross with you. I love the area. I raise my hands to your leadership, and I wish you well in your planning and all of the success of what you dream is possible. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was actually really incredible. I'm still just trying to organize all that. It was so powerful though how you've really articulated that if Canada just does its responsibility to treat First Nation people the way it treats everybody else, that we would be 400 billion per GDP. You know, it's kind of disheartening that there needs to be this much thought and discussion on something that seems so simple. And I really appreciate your very strong academic perspective on this. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you brought up. So you brought up the procurement, and that's a hot topic right now in the Yukon, as you alluded to. It's a bit unfortunate what's playing out right now in the Yukon, in that Yukon government delivered the procurement update, a 30-year overdue update, and then it separately carved out Yukon First Nation procurement. And so right now what we're seeing is a us versus them mentality and debate. And it's like, you know, the context of everything that you just spoke to is not at the table. The umbrella final agreements and the land claims and just that this is not just First Nations final agreements, it's all of Yukon's final agreements. It's creating jurisdictional certainty. It's allowing for regional governments to be more self-sufficient and to be more direct with their own resources and to be at the table for all those things. And the wealth of economic opportunities that start to become available and open up because of that. I would say that in the Yukon, we're 20 years, 25 years, it's coming up to 25 years in a couple days on Valentine's Day. And you know, we call ourselves, and I'm a chief and counsel for Teslin Click Council for the last 10 years, and we call ourselves Indian Act Plus. You know, it's just a little better than Indian Act because we're still figuring out. It was based off of that model. You know, that was kind of a rough model. It's been improved, enhanced. There's no longer a formula driven to First Nation governments. It's kind of, here's your package. They did the clawbacks. They did, you know, every own source revenue clawbacks, which is ridiculous. The more money you made as a government, they clawed back 50% through taxation. They froze that within the last few years because it was really a slippery slope. It's, you know, we want you to be self-sufficient. You should be self-sufficient, but the more you try, the harder we'll yank back. And It's been really interesting in all the opportunities that have been built into the final agreements. And I guess I just wanted to maybe get your perspective on how do you see regions like the Yukon where there are really organized First Nation groups with these regional opportunities like the resource sector, the tourism sector, all these growing business opportunities. How do we connect First Nation communities with business? I mean, you gave some really startling facts that 85% of all businesses aren't engaged at all with First Nations. That scares me. I mean, we're 100% of the land, and that's where all business occurs. But most businesses, that's not their direct. That's that. And I saw the CCAB, and maybe it was through Kelly Lindsay, where they said that it was like. From a First Nation perspective, how meaningful are the partnerships? And it was really a dismal assessment there. It was in a 4 years ago now. And so, Carol, if you could maybe enlighten us on what do you see as kind of that formula, that approach? What's the mindset? You know, what's missing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I really encourage being able to. I introduce this concept of money, meaning, and metrics as an interrelationship of shaping economic strength. So, understanding our freedom of shaping our money and experience of money, there's new tools around measuring well-being, utilizing money. There's new tools like natural capital accounting, being able to understand the metrics of designing a value of your economic strength. So designing the story of your economic strength becomes really important in telling that story and in being able to refer, and I don't know the entire context. Thank you for telling me a little bit of some of that sense of the struggle from the procurement perspective, that while that initiative is on the right track of utilizing procurement as a tool of Indigenous economic design, it sounds like you're not telling the same story, that you need to get on the same story of we're telling the story of economic success and inclusion. Those old constructs of us and them are not useful for telling that narrative of pride in economic resilience. I'm designing this tool called the Indigenomics Economic Freedom Index. I introduced the concept of economic freedom as the opposite of dependency. So you have established the structure of self-governance for the same purpose, to be able to live your ways of being and knowing within self-determination and this concept of economic freedom. So the index itself is an interface between measuring the degree of dependency within your fiscal relationship, the development of own source revenue, and that in relationship to investability. So looking at those three constructs of economic design, reducing dependency, increasing own source revenue, and establishing an environment of investability, that is what I'm wanting the concept of an Indigenomics Economic Freedom Index to be able to facilitate. But also connecting that idea of economic freedom to the 100 billion. A lot of times people ask me, well, you know, is this about the money? What is this about? 100 billion is only to draw our attention to a future reality of what is possible. 100 billion as a function to express in our regions has to be directly connected to our well-being. And if those are not connected, that's really the place of what we want the function of self-governance and self-determination to be able to do. So introducing this concept of economic freedom That is also what I encourage you within your CC planning, is dreaming and designing the results of economic strength. What does that look like? What do your partnerships look like? What do you learn from your existing agreements? What do you learn from agreements around you? So activating your economic strength in your relationships, facilitating that in everything that you do. We are an economic powerhouse. That is really the foundation of Indigenomics.
Wonderful. And I just wanted to make one last comment. In Carcross specifically is this focal point in tourism in the Yukon. It's considered one of the highest tourism gateways in the Yukon. And when you actually look at the economics, the income, per capita income per community, Carcross sits close to the bottom, if not the very bottom. And so you don't see this translation of wealth from tourism activities, and there's lots of businesses, there's lots of activity, there's cruise ships coming through, and we're not seeing that translate into wealth. But lo and behold, they hold the impacts. They have to, they have to manage the traffic. They have to clean up the garbage. People don't want their beaches looking like trash bins, so they do that all because there's pride in place. And I we've held special public houses just to deal with that, but it really irks me. No matter how much we've done, you're only scratching the surface of the problem. And just thought I'd bring that back to you. Is there any kind of thoughts on that, and do you see that elsewhere, and maybe transitioning from that to something more meaningful?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. And oftentimes that's referred to as leakage in places of where you're not actualizing the wealth staying within your community. So building those pressure points is something really important to include within the development of the economic component of your comprehensive plan. So those pressure points can be included, whether that's parks relationships, service relationships, caretaking, management, all of those aspects. Really, how do you activate those and also place value on them? So in placing value on those relationships, again, that's facilitating that concept of you're realizing your economic strength.
I'm just going to ask my team, is there any questions coming in through the social media before I close this off? I see nodding. A thumb up means
We're okay. Yeah,
no
I think
questions?
we're okay.
Oh,
I don't know if anyone on the
okay.
Zoom
Well,
wants to.
Well, I was going to say, so Caroline, if you were to say these are the three things that must be in place for not just to survive but thrive in terms of self-determination in communities, what are the three factors that you have found through Indigenomics that need to be present? So I was thinking governance, having a firm governance framework in a way, but you had said true leaders, finding your leaders.
I think it's a accessibility to your business leadership. People know how to connect with you. There are so many times I see that a nation may have their own website, or they may have their dev corporation, and it's not clear who needs to be met with or what the process is.
Okay, so accessible leadership.
Message of being open for business and having a clear process for that, I think, is very important. Developing metrics of your economic strength and communicating that, and communicating areas of interest of where you want to develop partnerships. Sometimes I've seen that in terms of developing a regional or nation-based open house. So you invite everyone from real estate to lawyers to engineers to road builders, whatever that is. You invite your full spectrum, and your entire message is you're ready to do business. And whether that facilitates into small partnerships that end up into larger ownership pieces, opening the door that you're ready to do business, inviting the potential partners in, building visibility of the metrics of your economic strength, that's really, I think, a core component of being able to build and design your economy from.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was awesome.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've gone over our time, but I think it was really valuable. And
Awesome.
I want to really thank you so much for joining us. I was really surprised and grateful that you were available and interested to meet with us. And even more blown away that I found out you actually been to Carcross and spent some time. That really makes me feel good about this, that there was that strong context already. And I feel that there was a lot of great insight here. So Ganachish, thank you so much.
My only regret tonight is that if I was there, I'm positive there would be moose soup. Now I really miss moose soup.
There we go. Well, we'll have some for you next time.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ganachish. And now I believe we're going to be moving on to Christine and Ryan are going to be taking us through the development and resilience pillar review. And I'll just ask Christine to give that broad overview again. I kind of got a little excited there and jumped right into a few other things, but it'd be nice if we could just maybe set a bit of a tone in that overview. Thank you
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to do a shout out. I saw Lori there. Hi, Lori. Thanks for joining us, hon. All right. So I'm going to share Ryan and I are the ones holding the pen, primarily Ryan. And so this reflects, we're now going to go through very specific sections. As we know, it's development and resilience, right? That's the focus of today. But before I do that, yeah, we would like to do a little bit of the front end. So no doubt you've downloaded the plan. So let's go there. So this is the draft, guys. So you're looking at a much nicer one, whereas I'm using the actual draft plan that Ryan and I will continue to work on with the feedback from you, the guidance from the steering committee and others, right, as we go forward. So with that, this is the providing the context, the front end, the traditional territory view. So the CCP process is a transformative undertaking. It's an opportunity for everyone to go, okay, stop. What have we got here? Where have we been? What has been our journey to date? And what have we learned? And what are our strengths and gifts as we move forward? Let's do that work. So that is what you do right at the beginning. So it's quite transformative. It's intended to be holistic, community-driven process. Comprehensive community plan is all things human, including the land in which we rely upon, the water, the air, the non-human animals, right? And it's about improving, it looks at things, shared goals like improved sustainability, self-sufficiency, and of course, access to good governance. The baseline to all things successful is good governance. So the Carcross-Tagus First Nation are absolute leaders. They undertook this ambitious planning initiative, and it's the first self-governing First Nation to develop a CCP, the Comprehensive Community Plan. So from now on, I'm just going to say CCP in Canada. They're also the very first one to do it, as Blair had said, traditional territory based. And then within that traditional territory, they noted that we have some Euro-Canadian communities. And perhaps we should ask them what they're doing, what they're thinking as we make our plan for the traditional territory. What leadership, what inclusivity, right? The very things that Carol-Ann was talking about. So in their wisdom, Carcross-Tagus First Nation have focused on the regional community residing in the traditional territory and have included the non-Indigenous residents in the planning process. So the plan, entitled Awakening the Greatness Within, is the combined vision of 5 communities in the Southern Lakes region of the Yukon Territory. The Carcross-Tagus First Nation and the unincorporated communities of Carcross, Mount Lorne, Marsh Lake, and Tagish all joined in. So, and the governance bodies, so the local advisory committees. So these 6 jurisdictions represent a significant range of perspectives, capacities, traditions, while also facing different challenges, and therefore bring different and welcome perspectives into the planning process. It's quite a potpourri as a result. And this CCP is shaped by the 5 communities and works to galvanize local action through community-focused activities led by this regional collective of community partners, working together as equals through a spirit of reconciliation and improved local capacity. So reconciliation, which is the primary area of focus in this CCP, requires specific and thoughtful actions such as fostering improved stewardship of the land, including managing the seasonal use of the land, and improving the land's ability to buffer environmental stress and increase its ability to recover from impacts as they occur, thus continuing to support the cultural and traditional practices of the First Nation. So the areas that we looked at, so needless to say, the traditional territory forms the boundary of the CCP. And so through storytelling, each community has been able to share both their uniqueness as well as the mutuality with each of their own stories. You start to hear yourself, right? To expedite the broad mandate, right? It's massive. It's a massive undertaking. So let's organize it. Let's scope it. Let's create meaningful processes within the process that all of us can move forward with. And so that was the breaking it down into a framework of pillars so which the community-based actions can be prioritized. So the pillars include governance, education, wellness, development, and resilience. And voila, here we are. This is where we are today because we've gone through those other ones. Do check that out. It's available. Anybody can take a look at them. If you missed those Monday and Wednesday, please check them out. So development, operationalizing the desired strategic and thoughtful economic development, just as Caroline was saying, while also working to regulate the potential and known impacts of said development through collective wisdom. Wait a minute, we've seen this. Okay, can we set something up here, guys? Because we know it's going to happen if we plan for this, right? Let's bring the journey to the fore, learn from what we've already done and what other people have done. Resilience, ensuring the community collectively can make use of available resource to respond to, withstand, and recover from, so build back better, from harmful, hazardous situations while continuing to maintain the provision of critical community services. That's resiliency in a nutshell. So we're working towards that through the CCP. I'm just going to cruise down here, folks, because what we did do is we also isolated. So there are so many actions, rightly so. 5 communities coming together to create a plan to work together on very specific concerns, priorities, and opportunities. Needless to say, we had to prioritize, right? Especially the ones that are readily to do, need to get done right away, or will serve as the vehicle, the framework in which everyone will work together. So those were the priorities. So the 5 priorities recommended were governance, secure funding to establish the required baseline for implementing the CCP, the ready, set, go, including establishing the nonprofit and communicating out to the communities this intent and the benefits in doing so. Hey guys, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Remember we're doing the CCP? This is one of the things that came out of that. These are the things that it's going to help us do. Follow up, talk to us. Education, number 2, provide new opportunities for non-First Nation citizens to learn about the Carcross-Tagish First Nation. There's great interest and culture, including training opportunities for local operators, frontline staff, to enable and support a shared understanding about the way they share local stories, values, culture, and history, because there are story holders and you need to recognize that things need to be done according to protocol. Resilience, number 3, gain an understanding as to where each of the communities are in their emergency planning with the intent of facilitating a regional response to hazard and risk, sharing resources, sharing capacity, sharing know-how, coming together. That is what communities do, right? It's what the North is known for. Governance, number 4, the steering committee to proceed with the nonprofit society governance vehicle, emphasizing its role in the founding board of directors, which is the steering committee. The folks that have been part of this process the entire way will serve as the board of directors. And number 5, development, create a work for hire map that links existing training and vacant positions within the regional community. In addition, enable community members to be aware of the current business focused training and capacity development opportunities and build upon them. Because oftentimes people don't know that there are RPTs out there or that there's training available. And they're like, I really would have liked to have done that training. Let's get the word out there. Let's make sure everybody knows. We could do that with a hub, right? The nonprofit society, carry through. It would be the hub. Ryan, you look like you want to say something, buddy.
Oh, you can read me so well. I was just going to say not to repeat our talk on Monday, but just because it's been brought up a little here. The not-for-profit itself is intended to facilitate resilience and development, largely as a lobbying entity, and to ensure responsible development occurs, basically along the lines that were described earlier.
Yeah, and that's the small L lobbying, just because that always makes people nervous, including government.
Small L lobbying.
Because you've got to register if you're a lobbyist, federal regs. All right, thank you, big guy. And of course, Ryan pops in whenever, and he'll do that throughout. And I love it. Hey, can we do a polling before I go on to the next section, or a prize? Can we do something fun?
I do have a prize.
You can do a poll too.
So the prize winner for tonight, we have Carl Wheeler.
Carl Wheeler, come on down.
Congratulations.
Awesome. I like that. Hey, I just like to break it up a bit. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Yeah, and we'll send an email to get the mailing address. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's so nice. I love that. Did you have a poll question?
We're gonna load one up here in 30 seconds.
Awesome. Take a look at the app, guys. And hey, make sure you download the CCP, fill out the feedback form, and get your name entered for a prize. Woohoo! A prize! I never win, but perhaps you might. So do enter. All right. So now we moseyed on down in the CCP draft. Again, download that baby and take a look. But we're in 3.4, section 3.4 development. And for that draft, it's on page 16. But then just take a look at the table of contents. It'll pop you right down there. So community development is both welcomed and presents challenges in the Southern Lakes region. This duality creates a fluctuating paradigm in which development is championed for its benefits, while at the same time opposed for its known and anticipated impacts, right? Like, we love tourism, we love the opportunities it provides, we love the services that get created locally for us to also enjoy, but we also want to manage the impacts of too many humans and all that comes with them, the garbage, the need for washrooms, the need for, et cetera. Oh, as a result, fostering desired community development is the top priority by residents. Thoughtful and relevant community development is reported to be a means of asserting community values while also enabling local economies to grow, right? So a key attribute of sensitive community development is improved communication between the public and stakeholders to reduce fluctuations in support for development initiatives. Effective communication, ongoing meaningful communication, allowing people to dive in where they see themselves being useful, right? Like was said in terms of permeable, accountable, right? Actionable. Residents also identify the needs for improved infrastructure to support job creation via establishment of improved facilities and the provision of services to retain current residents and attract newcomers to the area. Residents specifically noted the need for improved water and wastewater infrastructure, recreation facilities, and improved community facilities. So then we take a look at, then I'm going to zip on down to, we're going to go on to section 3.5. Oh, look at that lovely map. Do take a look at the illustrations in the plan, because what it does, as you can see, this one illustrates all the services, the infrastructure, the assets, not the natural assets, which of course are everywhere, and the ecosystem services they provide. But here, great maps in here, even for the locals. So,
Christine, just before you move on, the maps also do a nice job of showing the differences between the communities in CTFN's traditional territory.
Nice. Thanks, Ryan. So of course, as we heard from Carol Ann, as well as Blair, as well as the research and the communities, the completion of a regional and local land use planning compliance with established and future land use regulations and respect for the traditions and culture of the CTFN were clearly expressed as crucial to managing the impacts of development in the Southern Lakes region. Pride of place, maintaining what it is that people want to come and see, right? So 3.5, resilience. Community resilience is the sustained ability of communities to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity. So anything that's coming at you, right? Yeah, we got this. We kind of planned that. We knew that was going to happen, and this is what we have in place. Oh, we didn't expect that. But you know what? We have so many strengths and gifts, and we've been practicing. We know what we need to do. We can, by and large, respond. Oh, here we go. Two aspects of resilience are evident in the discourse provided in the survey. So through the survey, we know it's training and increased preparedness and improved ecosystem health, right? So wildfires, doing the fire smart, making sure that the forests have high integrity so that they're able to withstand the extreme drought that's going to continue as a result of climate change. So these are some of the things that we bring into the plan. As with other pillars, much of the work to increase the region's readiness and ability to navigate extreme environmental events is predicated on the improved sense of community. Just as I don't know why I keep remembering the Carol Ann, Ms. Hilton, that she had mentioned. Where was I now? Participate in improved sense of community, and many survey respondents talked about the need to come together to protect the land and each other through resulting improvement of their capacities. So let's draw out the strengths and gifts. Let's bring them right to the fore, and let's employ them. Reconciliation is important to this process. Training to provide emergency services and grow food locally via the Carcross-Tagus First Nation Learning Farm were viewed by residents as tangible examples of how the community can come together to improve local self-sufficiency, thus increasing community resiliency, right? Food security, water security, to feel and be safe. So advancing resilience should also be fostered through improved stewardship of the land. Stewardship is the case, in this case, reflects the need to manage seasonal impacts by the land of the people using it. So we're going to move along. Here's another lovely one. Hey, geez, look at that, recreation infrastructure. Do check that out, folks. I'm just loving the illustrations. So, as I mentioned, the community stories. Now we're going to mosey on down to the action planning. So section 5.4. Let's go take a look at that one. As you can see, as I'm scrolling down, there are a lot of action plans, and that's wonderful because that's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Who's doing what? What do they need? Any supports? Who's going to work with them? When is it going to be done? That's what all those details are essential. Yes, Ryan.
We have our first poll question up.
All right.
So do you think responsible community development can support reconciliation in the CTFN traditional territory?
Oh, I love that question. That's a great question. Geez, I hope folks take the opportunity. Thank you, Ryan. So here we are, so the development action plan. So you heard the high level priorities. You got some of the context. So then the what? So what do we do, right? So community-focused development is a process whereby community members come together to take collective action to foster mutually beneficial economic development, including development sites for housing, soil types, preparing the school and health center for increases in population, and enabling and supporting local businesses. So community-focused development ensures that the required protocols are in place to regulate development and to mitigate environmental damage, right? When they're in place and people are observing them, we're not seeing the impacts that we normally would. So in the survey, facilitating thoughtful and responsible tourism was definitely a priority, enabling mutual benefits to residents and industry. You know, how about we get some of that value? Facilitating improved regulation that represents local values and interests instead of shopping around and importing. Enabling and supporting employment opportunities, that's a big one, right? Including seasonal, all types of employment. Identify and address community infrastructure requirements. What is needed to support? Ensuring sustainable outcomes from development initiatives in accordance to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Take a look, all 17. Creating opportunities for enhanced dialogue between stakeholders. So here's the action plan. So as you see, this is the front end. It gets far more detailed below, but what we do is we just capture it. So, excuse me, please. Of all those priorities, the number 1, develop appropriate infrastructure to serve residents. Action, coordinate infrastructure development objectives of the 5 communities and expand the regional infrastructure portfolio in a responsive timeline. I would highly recommend doing an asset management plan specific to this, because then you would know exactly what's required, when it's required, how much it's going to cost, and when where it's going to come from. So the task, so D11, consolidate local asset inventories of the government of Yukon, Carcross-Tagus and others to gain a complete infrastructure baseline. What do we got? Where's the gaps? How are we going to fill them? Right? Planning. Conduct a deliberate and structured survey of community perspectives about infrastructure and recommend improvements necessary to address shortfalls, including asset maintenance, restoration, and management. The 5 communities will guide the development of a Southern Lakes comprehensive asset management plan with a shared voice. Look at that, hey? My suggestions pop right in there. You'd almost think we wrote this. All right, number 2, encourage and support entrepreneurs. Boy, that is one thing we have lots of in the Yukon, is a lot of really bright young entrepreneurs just ready to rip. Encourage and support D2. Encourage and support locals, youth and adults, to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, strengthening collective capacity to realize mutually valued opportunities. You don't have to do it alone. Gosh, do it as a collective. Support each other. And, you know, as Caroline had illustrated with the Facebook idea, D2-1, create a work for hire map. Remember I mentioned that? It's very much in there, and it's very much how are people to know what's available. And in addition to that, a comprehensive community plan nonprofit could bring in relevant training, right? They could isolate where the gaps are and bring that in. So do it very strategically, logically, and make sure everybody knows. So I will make a plug here. To be informed takes work. You got to get over it and get to work. So if you're not getting information from your community, but you know information is being disseminated, given out, I ask you to ask yourself, what can I be doing to make sure I get that information, right? So instead of waiting for someone to tell you or give you, being informed takes work. We got to get over it and just get to work. Number 3, manage the impacts of development with specific mention of tourism and recreation on the land and on the 5 communities. You're looking like you want my attention, Ryan. Is there anything you need?
We've got our second polling question up, which is how prepared do you feel for an extreme environmental event? And Jesse wants me to say that's not a tsunami.
No, it's not a tsunami, no.
You mean like or something?
Yeah. So in the Yukon, and if you take a look at the comprehensive community plan, we do a little bit of a write-up on that, what we can anticipate in the Yukon, and extreme drought, extreme heat, the wildfires. So how prepared are you feeling for that? Thank you very much, folks. I'm loving these questions you're putting forward. Way to go, team. All right. So here we are. Manage the impacts of development. Well, D3, develop and implement a comprehensive regional plan with a specific focus upon the overall thoughtful and sustainable use of the land base. Maybe build on the CCP. So D3-1, develop a comprehensive regional land use plan to include gaining an understanding of how many visitors there are in the region in partnership with the various agencies. Number 2, develop a coordinated recreational land use management policy and supporting regulations. Get it out there, teach the people. Number 3, refurbish, replace, or construct required infrastructure based on the recommendation of the regionally focused plan. Number 4, design and install strategic wayfinding and interpretive signage. Keep people out of the areas you don't want them in. Often they wander in them, don't even know they're not supposed to be there, and they're impacting, and they would really be woeful to know that. And number 5, and then we'll move over to Ryan because he looks like he wants to talk again. Number 5, update community mapping to thoughtfully promote tourism attractions, including trail maps and protocols, and suggest where restrictions apply, as well as establish a code of conduct, contributing to the sustainable tourism sector, and include on the back of the revised community map. All right, Ryan.
We just have a comment from
an
online.
Good. Lovely.
So on the topic, the community development has to be meaningfully engaged by community and government to work. We can plan ourselves to a T, but if all 3 levels of government do not support in spirit, legislation, and monetary, it is not reconciliation.
Absolutely. Here, 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 here. And we all need to step up. So when we're engaging, please engage, right? Show up, step up. But I absolutely agree. Thank you very much for that comment, folks, because we do need to keep it real. Absolutely. Beautiful. Number 4 is improve local service provision. And so that was and it's very specifically laid out. Address shortfalls in residential water delivery and coordinate waste management. That was a big one, right? Establish and import effective water delivery to ensure sufficient potable water supply when necessary, especially in the seasons when there's a huge draw. Plan for it. And I know that there's jurisdictional issues. So we need to plan for that, right? Let's be strategic. D4.2, coordinate waste management services with the intent to secure the required funds to develop a transfer station. Typo alert, D4.2, Ryan. A transfer station to serve the Southern Lakes region. If you could just keep track of that, that'd be great. Yeah, Ryan? You got it.
Just acknowledging we got the typo.
You rock. Thanks. All right, number 5, final one for economic. Provide development and environmental certainty to the Southern Lakes region, right? Enacting the CCP, building on the CCP, getting the nonprofit society in place, moving forward gives a sense of certainty. Advocate for the Whitehorse Regional Land Use Plan. So there is a big drive to get this baby going and done. Issue letter inviting the Yukon Regional Land Use Planning Commission, YG, and other Yukon First Nation to form a Whitehorse Regional Land Use Planning Commission. That's very specific. D5, to liaise with other Yukon First Nation and the Yukon Forum. And you're looking like you'd like to speak again. Go ahead, Ryan.
You caught us with our pants down. What did you ask?
Oh no, I thought you just looked like you really wanted to say something. Okay, I'm going to go with the hand up thing.
We were having fun talking about the Whitehorse Regional Land Use Plan and how important it is.
Awesome. Please proceed. All right. And catalog data collected from the CCP, right, as well as other processes. And recommend a regional planning tuck it in, build on it, right? You've already got all these voices that have guided the process to date. And the other work to inform future regional resource assessments, right? Build on it. And as I said, these are all further populated in greater detail. And what that is for operational planning, budget planning, capacity planning, right? These are great things to, especially for people with mandates for development, right? This helps them work forward. All right, so the final action plan we're going to take a look at should be right here. All right, and I knew that, and I had it written down, but I totally ignored my notes. Okay, Christine, 5.5, resilience action plan. Community resilience, again, is the sustainability to utilize available resources to respond to, withstand, and recover from adverse situations while still providing essential community services. So some of these are, the CCP can contribute to the local resilience by reducing risk of landscape hazards, right? We can do a hazard assessment. Whenever you're going to develop anything, hey, do that kind of an assessment, that baseline assessment. Again, what have we got? What have we done to date? What's been happening here already? And then what do we need to go forward? Increasing opportunities for residents to rely on each other for support. That's wonderful for resilience. Improving ecosystem health through the responsible use of the land. Improving local energy security through the development of local renewable energy solutions, while also mitigating climate change, right? If you're going to do stuff with bioenergy, you're offsetting the use of fossil fuel use. Improving the ability of communities in the Southern Lakes region to adapt to climate change. These all build resilience. So the following community resilience action plan has been compiled to connect proposed actions with the objectives brought to the fore through the CCP engagement. First objective, improve emergency response planning. It's a wonderful idea. It's a great way to continue to build on the momentum, as well as solidify that regional approach. Get and understand where each of the communities are in their emergency planning and execution capacity, and then develop that with the intent of facilitating a regional response to hazards and risks. The tasks: 1, assess existing emergency plans, protocols, and resources available in the 5 communities. 2, negotiate an agreement between the responsible authorities to create and implement a regional emergency response plan with the inclusion of a climate lens that strategically includes the impacts of climate change. And number 3, the 5 communities will organize, coordinate, and direct the execution of a regionally focused emergency response plan. The strengths and gifts are there for us, folks. Let's just come bring it together. Number 2 objective, improve the ecological management and health of the land. And the action, gain an understanding as to 1, where there's already ecosystem strain due to the current development. 2, where there are further sensitive ecosystems. 3, strategically develop the management regimes that enable and support ecosystem-focused development. Please, let's rely on our knowledge holders for this. They know the land. They can absolutely direct how this needs to be done. So, and then here, the tasks are, number 1, R21, conduct an ecosystem health analysis. Where are we at? How are we doing? Where are the stress points? Yeah, Ryan? Oh, you're good?
The last polling question is up.
Yay! What is it?
It is, how much do you support the implementation of these actions?
Oh, I super duper do. Oh yeah, it's not me. Yeah, everybody get on there. Let us know what you're thinking, because you're going to be entered for a draw for a prize. R22, using the ecosystem health analysis to identify the priority actions from the regional perspective to develop the steps required to move forward with the realization of an ecosystem-focused CCP that enables and supports community resilience. Right? As soon as you know where your gaps are, you can work towards addressing them. And where you notice that there's sensitive areas, you can create the management around that to keep humans out, however that is, right? Including, willow fences, right? Like there's a whole number of things you can be doing. And then of course, then we had all of these the action plan right here. All right. And of course, the establish energy independence through generating alternatives, examine renewable energy alternatives to reduce the global impact of vehicle use, electricity consumption, and heating needs in the Southern Lakes region. 3, develop a baseline for energy use in the 5 communities, right? What do we got? Develop the regional integrated resource plan that identifies generating opportunities, infrastructure requirements, including district heating possibilities, investment needs, and employment outcomes. And you've got one of the major gurus of the territory right here, Ryan Hennessy. He is Mr. Biomass, right? And then the final one, the communities will organize, coordinate, and direct the execution of a regionally focused power energy development. All right, okay, so the final step is to take a look at priority implementation, right? Everyone's all like, plans, a plan. Let's get to the action. All right, so we're gonna do that. So we're going to priority implementation. Let's do that, zippity doo dah. Where did I end up here? Oh, here we are. So James Smith, Senior Director of Operations, Carcross-Tagus First Nation. We want to talk about how we can get to a place so we can implement some of these ideas that have been milling about for years, if not decades. Here, let's do that. Enough planning. So from the outset, community input on the CCP process and objectives was clear. The community did not want to participate in the development of yet another plan. And as a planner, I'm hearing your words. You guys are planned out. How about if we, get all actioned out? Why don't we just go for broke? So the community wanted to see action result from the investment of their time, and purposefully, we have worked to keep a clear pathway for implementation of the CCP at the forefront of the planning process since the outset. And of course, because the pathway is intended to honor the passion underlying the ideas presented to us, the time it took for volunteer members of the steering committee and residents to communicate them to us, and the fact that much of this has been said before, right? We really want to honor you, the people that made this happen. And I hope this plan, because we just hold the pen, does that. And of course, as we know, limited capacity is a difficult challenge to address. Ideas can be big. Actualizing them is often an equally big undertaking, if not bigger. So over the past few years, we've often heard the community has competing challenges. Champions are burnt out, but that change still needs to occur. For this reason, many residents see a benefit in the 5 communities working together to accomplish change. But many have communicated their limits to what can be done. Let's keep it real, folks. The CCP, therefore, is a balance between articulating complex solutions, complex issues, and ensuring the act of implementing those solutions is within the means of the community to accomplish. So we busted the CCP into a short term and to a long term. And we looked very much at governance. And if please take a look at the Monday session, because Ryan kindly takes the time to go through the governance portions of the images, because those are big deals, right? They're big deals. Without that governance framework in place, human folly. Whew, I'm telling you, not much gets done. People get discouraged and we walked off and we have to start again, right? Because it still needs to get done. So these actions, the actions above and below, so the priorities are intended to awaken the greatness within by attracting resources to the implementation process and setting the stage for longer term phase and moving through the 2 pathways envisioned for it. So as I mentioned, these are the priorities: governance, secure funding to establish the required baseline for implementing the CCP; education, provide new opportunities for non-First Nation citizens to learn about the Carcross-Tagish First Nation culture, including training opportunities. 3, resilience. Gain an understanding as to where each of the communities are in their emergency planning and then come together. Number 4, governance. The steering committee to proceed with the nonprofit society governance vehicle, emphasizing the role in the founding board of directors. And number 5, create a work for hire map and make sure folks know the opportunities that are out there. Get a sense of where the gaps are. But let's definitely optimize the opportunities that the staff and folks within the communities have already brought to the table. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan because I know he wants to close up on implementation.
No, I was just going to say for those just joining us this evening, if you scroll up to the figure 8 there, the jawbreaker. Oh, no, sorry.
Nice. One more.
Those are the 2 pathways that Christine just mentioned. So when you look at this as a package, they really take you in one of 2 directions. One is protecting the integrity and health of the land, and the other is creating healthy and prosperous communities.
Beautiful, brother.
Go on.
And I really do need to hand it back to you when it comes to that whole creative stuff. I always miss out on that entirely. When you get on there and you just kind of put it in a nutshell, it's like, voila. All right, so with that, be sure to download the CCP draft and take a peek and let us know. Fill out the feedback form as many times as you need to. Your name gets entered for a draw. And browse the app. Follow for polling opportunities, which we just had. We don't have anything else. What about, okay, over to you guys.
We have prizes.
I love that.
Okay. So before we wrap up, we drew a number of prizes. So we have Ron Russo and Lynn Payjot and Geraldine Scarf. And that's it.
Awesome.
What did they win?
What did they win?
We will email them to get their mailing address, and they've won Visa gift cards.
Yes. Awesome. I love that. Gunter's always got the best prizes, I tell you. It just makes it so exciting. Okay, I'll stop now. Over to you guys. And where's Blair? Where's the man? Oh, stop sharing. Okay, yes, Christine. I totally missed my cue there. Sorry, James. Or sorry, Blair. I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, sorry, I'm just turning my camera back on here. Wonderful. So looks like we've gone through the agenda. Wow, what an exciting week. We've been really pounding through a lot of material. I really appreciate everybody who's been able to tune in. For those of you who weren't able to tune in, we're going to make it well known that people can come back, check out content. The videos are going to be posted for the 2 weeks with the plan, and yeah, what a great great keynotes, great discussion. This has been amazing, truly.
And I have to say, Gunter, you guys rock, man. You rock. That's all I got to say. And thank you to the steering committee members. You guys rock.
There we go. We're done. Hooray.
Bye.
We're going to end this evening with some of our beautiful pre-recorded content. I just want to also give a shout out to the Northern Underground Expressions. The song that will be leading us out will be Wine, followed by Kevin Barr and Boyd Benjamin, Carcross Road Trip. And we will be concluding the final video, Danazagi Gucho Hin. Nice. So if you wanted to listen to some cool tunes and some amazing music videos, stay tuned. Otherwise, gonna cheesh.
a life that makes me slow my stride. Mama said I'll always be a hero in my eyes. I can be the strongest in myself, I don't despise. Feel like I'm a prophet in disguise, but most these people's songs are lies, so what's the diff of mine? If everyone sees different lenses, how could I be blind? I just need to understand these simple little lines, the rhythm of my mind, my recipe to feeling fine. Yeah, I really feel I'm wound up. Maybe I'm drunk, damn, maybe too wind up. I think that I should hunker down, feel like I have wine too much. But every time I speak my mind, they say my lines are sus. I give up, kidding, cause I will always be down. My moment is now, I feel that when they listen, I'm proud. So look at me, dad, some of these kids are calling me rad. I feel like a lad, past that phase of kick to the can, falling in a new brand, but also walking on my hands, trying to balance what I can and never taking Zans. Now I'm blinded like a horse racing to my plans, but I see that paper's coarse and it grinds my soul like sand. Good thing I got two souls in one left hand, cause I miss my life with that first blow, then the next bam, yell my name like who knows, and my skin goes clam. Kinda wanna be the only person, and if it's worth it, maybe I'll be perfect. To close the curtains, they're probably hurting, but no one's asking, cause they're doing what they're told. It's tragic if they unfold, it's positive if they are old, and magic if they are told. Again, mention what I did without my friends, and that is why I represent. I keep my hand out for anyone to lend, but when that time's up, don't you dare pretend. Never will I live a life that makes me slow my stride. Mama said I'll always be a hero in my eyes. I can be the strongest in myself, I don't despise. Feel like I'm a prophet in disguise, but most these people's songs are lies, so what's the diff of mine? If everyone has different lenses, how could I be blind? I just need to understand these simple little lines, the rhythm on my mind, my recipe to feeling fine. Yeah.
And that was the Northern Underground Society, right? Is that right? Did I say that right? The Northern Underground Expressions wine, and yeah. So we'll put on Car Cross Road Trip, and then we'll end with Denizegi. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to end the videos and just end us with some content. Thank you for joining us.
Sagara, Kutuayo. Nona, 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 Sagara, Kuganugulin. Hey, 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 na ho, ho, na hey, na hey. Hey, 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 na ho, ho, na hey, na hey. Anateka, Sagara, Kuganugulin. Nugin, Anugin, Sagara, Kuganugulin. Nona, 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 Sagara, Kutikalakuda. Hey, 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 na ho, ho, na hey, na hey. Hey, 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 na ho, ho, na hey, na hey. Anateka, Sagara, Kutikalakuda. Nugin, Anugin, Sagara, Kuganugulin. Nona, 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 Sagara, Kutikalakuda.